In the heart of the kingdom of Ethelgard, preparations were underway for the grand tournament of the Sunstone, an event held once every decade to find the realm's greatest champion. Knights, warriors, and mercenaries from every corner of the land flocked to the capital, their eyes gleaming with the promise of fame, fortune, and the legendary Sunstone blade, a sword said to be forged from a fallen star. Among them was Cale, a warrior from the quiet northern village of Oakhaven. He wasn't the tallest or the strongest, and his armor, though well maintained, bore the marks of countless skirmishes rather than the polished gleam of tournament steel. He carried a simple, unadorned longsword, a family heirloom passed down through generations. Cale hadn't come for glory or gold. He fought for a different reason, a principle instilled in him by his late father. Honor is a warrior's true shield. The tournament began with a thunderous roar from the crowd. The first rounds were a blur of clashing steel and splintering shields. Cale moved through his opponents with a quiet efficiency that baffled many. He didn't use brute force or flashy techniques. Instead, he was a master of observation. He'd study his opponent's stance, their breathing, the subtle shift of their weight, and find the perfect moment to disarm them. He never struck a fallen foe or taunted a defeated one. After each match, he would offer a hand to his opponent, a nod of respect that earned him quiet admiration from some and scorn from others who saw it as a weakness. One of his early opponents was a hulking brute named Gorm, known for his savagery. Gorm charged Cale like a bull, his massive axe swinging wildly. The crowd roared, expecting a swift and brutal end. But Cale didn't meet force with force. He sidestepped, parried, and weaved, letting Gorm exhaust himself. When the giant's swings became sluggish, Cale saw his opening. With a swift movement, he hooked his sword around the axe's haft, twisted, and sent the weapon flying from Gorm's hands. The giant stood there, disarmed and bewildered. Cale simply lowered his sword and bowed. Gorm, humbled, nodded in return and left the arena. As the tournament progressed, Cale's reputation grew. They called him the Humble Blade or the Silent Storm. He wasn't just winning. He was changing the very atmosphere of the tournament. His matches were less about brutal victory and more about a showcase of skill and respect. Other warriors began to follow his example. The gratuitous taunts lessened, and acts of sportsmanship became more common. He was proving that strength wasn't just about how hard you could hit, but about the control and discipline you possessed. His greatest test came in the semi-finals against a knight named Sir Valerius. Valerius was the complete opposite of Cale. He was a nobleman, clad in ornate silver-plated armor, his every move dripping with arrogance. He was a crowd favorite, a master of spectacle who loved to play to the audience. Before their match, Valerius addressed the crowd, promising to put the humble peasant in his place and restore the tournament to its glorious, bloody purpose. The crowd erupted in cheers. The duel began. Valerius was incredibly skilled, his movements fast and precise. He pressed Cale relentlessly, forcing him onto the defensive. Sparks flew as their swords met again and again. Valerius was looking for a spectacular finish, a dramatic blow that would send the crowd into a frenzy. He lunged forward with a powerful thrust aimed at Kale's chest. It was a move designed to end the fight, but Kale had been waiting. At the last possible second, he pivoted, deflecting the blade just past his side. The force of Valerius's own lunge carried him forward, his momentum making him stumble and lose his footing. His ornate helmet, not properly secured in his haste, tumbled from his head and rolled across the sand, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. The entire arena fell silent. Kale stood over his disarmed and disoriented opponent. His sword was raised. A single, easy strike would grant him victory and a place in the final. The crowd held its breath, expecting the final blow. Valerius, kneeling on the ground, shut his eyes, bracing for the end. But the blow never came. Kale looked at his opponent, not with triumph, but with understanding. He saw not a villain, but a man blinded by pride. He lowered his sword, its point touching the sand. "The fight is over, Sir Valerius," Kale said, his voice calm but firm, carrying across the silent stadium. "There is no honor in this." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Valerius opened his eyes, staring at Kale in disbelief. He had been utterly defeated, yet he was being shown mercy he did not deserve. Shame washed over him, a far more potent feeling than the pain of any physical blow. He slowly picked up his helmet and stood, not looking at Kale, but at the ground. He then turned and walked from the arena without a word. The referee, stunned, eventually declared Kale the winner by forfeit. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some booed, feeling cheated of a dramatic finish, but many more began a slow, respectful applause that grew louder and louder. They had witnessed something far greater than a simple victory. Kale's opponent in the final was Lord Malika, the reigning champion. Malika was a fearsome warrior, a veteran of 100 battles, and a man who believed victory was the only thing that mattered, no matter the cost. He saw Kale's act of mercy towards Valerius not as honor, but as a fatal flaw he intended to exploit. The final match was the most intense of the entire tournament. Malika was a whirlwind of aggression, his heavy broadsword crashing against Kale's blade with brutal force. He fought without restraint, aiming to injure, to maim. He was testing Kale's resolve, trying to force him into a desperate, dishonorable fight for survival. The duel raged on, and Kale was pushed to his absolute limit. He suffered a cut on his arm and a deep gash on his leg. His shield was splintered, his body bruised and battered, yet he never faltered. He met every savage blow with a calm, disciplined defense. He refused to be drawn into Malikor's game of hatred. During a particularly fierce exchange, Malikor overextended on a powerful swing. Seeing the opening, Kale sidestepped and, with a precise maneuver, disarmed his opponent, sending the broadsword spinning away. Malikor was defenseless, but instead of surrendering, a cruel smile spread across his face. He reached into a hidden sheath on his boot and drew a small, wicked-looking dagger. It was a clear violation of the tournament rules. The crowd gasped in shock and outrage. The judges rose to their feet, ready to disqualify Malika. But Kale held up a hand, stopping them. He looked at Malika, who now circled him with the dagger, a predator ready to strike a wounded animal. "You believe this is victory?" Kale asked. his voice strained but clear, winning by any means. "There is no legacy in that, Lord Malak. Only an empty title." Malachor laughed. "Legacy is written by the victors, boy. Honor is a fairy tale for children." He lunged, the dagger flashing towards Cale. But Cale was prepared. Despite his injuries, he moved with surprising speed. He didn't try to block the dagger with his sword. Instead, he dropped his own sword completely. Clang! The sound of Cale's family heirloom hitting the sand echoed through the Nascent arena. With his hands free, he caught Malachor's wrist just as the dagger was about to strike. Using Malachor's own momentum against him, Cale twisted, throwing the champion off balance and sending him stumbling to the ground. The dagger skittered across the sand. Cale now stood unarmed over the fallen champion. He had no weapon. He had won the exchange through pure skill, and by willingly disarming himself, an act of supreme confidence and control. Malachor lay on the ground, defeated and humiliated, not by a sword, but by the very honor he so readily dismissed. Cale simply looked down at him, then turned to the royal box where the king sat, watching intently. Cale bowed deeply. "I yield," he said. The words hung in the air, stunning everyone. The judges, the crowd, the king himself were speechless. Cale had clearly won. He had disarmed the champion twice. The second time while being cheated. He had the victory in his grasp. "You have won, Cale of Oakhaven," the king finally said, his voice filled with awe. "The championship is yours." Cale shook his head gently. "Your Majesty, I came here to fight with honor, not to win a title. My purpose was to prove that a warrior's character is his greatest strength. Today, I believe I have done that. Taking a title after a fight like this would tarnish that very principle. The victory I sought was not over Lord Malachor, but for the spirit of what it means to be a true warrior." He then walked over, picked up his father's sword, and, limping from his injuries, began to walk out of the arena. He didn't look back at the sunstone blade, gleaming on its pedestal. He didn't wait for the roar of the crowd, but the roar came anyway. It started with a single person, then a dozen, then the entire stadium rose to its feet. It wasn't the cheer for a victor, but a thunderous ovation of profound respect for a man who had shown them all what true honor looked like. He had lost the final match by choice, but he had won something far more valuable. He left the capital not as a champion with a legendary sword, but as a humble warrior who had reminded an entire kingdom that some things are worth more than victory. His legend, the legend of the humble blade, would be told for generations, a story not of a winner, but of a true hero. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more tales of courage and honor. We'll see you next time.